You know, on this channel, I do a lot of complaining. It's kind of my wheelhouse. I like complaining about things. I complain about access media. I complain about accent experts talking about movie accents. I complain about people's misunderstanding of improv. And I do those things mainly because I'm a paid film historian and researcher, so I kind of just stick with the movie angle. But I'm also a musician, I'm also a composer, and I'm also a music critic. So today, I'd like to complain about all of the weird myths that have popped up around music. I'm not necessarily here to debunk them. I'm here to talk about how much I can't stand them. I'm just going to go ahead and get the first one out of the way as fast as I can. Greatest of lists. I hate them. I will talk about greatest of lists in movies in a later video and why I can't stand those. But for right now, let's stick with musicians. It is one of the dumbest, most useless things you can do is ranking the greatest guitarist or bassist or drummers or whatever in music. If you really want to engage in an absolutely just futile act, go ahead and start ranking the greatest musicians. Believe me, it's pointless. A part of the reason it's pointless is because everything about it, except for technical skill, is just entirely subjective. I mean, obviously. But even the technical skill part is problematic. You might think some person playing drums or guitar is the greatest you've ever heard, but I guarantee you, if you're just talking about technical skill, just go right on this platform here on YouTube and do a search on like awesome guitar solos by like 8-year-olds or something, and you will find like children doing incredible work on a guitar or a set of drums that will blow your mind. So technical skill, and this is going to sound a little bit strange to a lot of people, especially coming from a musician himself, technical skill is a dime a dozen. It really is. If you start learning an instrument around the age of 5 or 6, let's say guitar, then by the age of 15 or 16, you are going to be a virtuoso. You really are. You are going to be an expert at that instrument. You just are. And yeah, sure, it's impressive when people can play instruments really well. It is, but it's not something that is unfathomable to grasp. How did they do it? Well, they just, they started early, they rehearsed, they played every day, and, by their teens, they were really good. So, technical skill, it's not that impressive. Anyone who starts early enough and practices long enough is going to have an incredible amount of technical skill. So I don't really care about technical skill when it comes to ranking musicians. The other thing is style and time. Now, forget about style for a second. Let's just go with time. Jimi Hendrix has long been considered by a lot of people to be the greatest guitarist of all time. I would disagree with that. Not because I don't think he was great, but because I don't think, one, any guitarist is the greatest guitarist of all time, and two, I certainly don't think someone who died at the age of 27 can realistically be considered the greatest talent. I just don't. 27? Artists go through periods, artists develop, artists change. I'm not saying he's not a great guitarist. I'm saying by dying at the age of 27, we don't have a lot to go on. We also don't know how he would have developed. We don't know where he would have taken his craft. We don't know any of that. I mean, 27? Come on! Django Reinhardt, I think, is dying too young to really be considered the greatest. But that also takes us into the thing I was talking about with style, in that whenever you see these lists of the greatest guitarists of all time or the greatest drummers of all time, they're almost exclusively rock and roll. And you think, guys, there's a lot of other music out there. I mean, unless you're prepared to reel off the greatest classical and flamenco and jazz. And when I say classical, flamenco, and jazz, I mean also all the subgenres within those, unless you're willing or able, I should say, to just reel off the names of guitarists in those skill sets. If you can't do that, then don't tell me you know who the greatest guitarists of all time are. Because if all you're basing it on is a collection of rock music you've listened to, well then you really don't know what you're talking about. And yet, so many of these lists are just exclusively rock. And you're like, well, that's ignoring a lot of guitarists. A lot. And back to the style. The style thing also really bugs me. And I'll give you 2 good examples for the style. Buddy Rich and Ringo Starr. And I'll tell you why I use those 2 together. Because in the documentary, The Complete Beatles, George Martin, who I love, think was an absolutely great producer. But nonetheless, he said this and it kind of irritated me. He says in that Buddy Rich could play circles around Ringo Starr. And yeah, he could. He could technically do that. I get it. I get that he could do that. But, and now I'm going to say something that will probably annoy some of you. I don't care, but it probably will. But my main love in music is jazz. And I'm going to tell you right now, Buddy Rich is a hack. Okay, that guy had incredible technical skill. But when it comes to style, his style was, I can play a drum roll for 5 minutes straight. He had zero style, like none. He had no style. None. He was a hack. That man had no taste in music whatsoever. He has an appearance on the Mike Douglas show where he's dissing Chet Atkins. It's like, dude, shut up. Do you not know what you're talking about? And the answer is no, he doesn't know what he's talking about. And that takes us over to Ringo Starr, who, no, he couldn't play with the technical prowess of a Buddy Rich, or lots of drummers, quite frankly. But he had more style in his little finger than Buddy Rich had in his whole hack body, okay? Like, in my book, that right there puts Ringo miles ahead of Buddy the Hack Rich. It really does. Okay, so that's my annoyance with greatest of list. But now let's talk about music in general. Here's another annoyance I have, and this doesn't have to do with media or publications or people making lists. This has to do when you talk to somebody about music. And the topic comes up, what kind of music do you like? And the response is, I like everything. I know it's just a nice conversational way to be inoffensive. I get it. But sometimes people take it too far. Now, one time, I was working with this guy, and it was our first week, and we started talking about music, and he asked me what I liked, and I said, well, I grew up listening to rock and pop music, so obviously I like that. But, if you want to get, more specific about genres and things, I love jazz, and specifically I love big band jazz. I've listened to, and I can listen to, Benny Carter's Central City Sketches like a billion times. And of course I asked back about his, and I like everything. And I said, yeah, I know. None of us really hate music. If we like music, we can listen to pretty much anything. I said, but what's your main one that you like? Oh, I like everything. I really do. And I said, okay, all right. So, but you mainly mean like rock. He's like, no, I really do like all music equally. I'm a big fan of all of them. And by this point, I'm sorry, but I was so irritated. And because I have been studying music since I was a little kid, I just okay, I got 2 options here. 1, I can punch this guy and just end the conversation now. Or 2, I can be civil about this and just kind of really make him look like an idiot. So I chose option 2. And I said to him, okay, do me a favor. Can I give you a little quiz? And he said, sure, yeah. He was a little confused and didn't know what I was talking about. I said, okay, name 5 musicians, performers, players, singers, whatever, from the 1950s rock and roll era. And that was a piece of cake. A piece of cake. He was like, Buddy Holly, Elvis Presley, Little Richard, Jerry Lee Lewis, Chuck Berry, so on. And I was like, the 60s, the 70s, same thing. It was really easy. Beatles, Rolling Stones, The Who, the Kinks, The Doors, and so on. All very easy stuff. And then I said, okay, now do me a favor and name 5 musicians or bands from the West Coast cool jazz genre. He failed that one pretty badly. And then I asked him to name some big band, and he named Glenn Miller, I think, and he might have named Duke Ellington, but he didn't go very far with that one either. Then I said, okay, now, I said, give me 5 composers from the Renaissance era. And of course, he questioned what that even was. And I said, it's classical music, but it's the first kind of, or one of the earlier periods of classical music. And of course, he said, Beethoven? Mozart? And I said, no, the Renaissance. And I said, okay, how about the classical period? And he said, Mozart again. And I was like, okay, yeah, that's right. And Beethoven. I was like, well, he's, tail end and into the Romantic era. And he said, Romantic? Like love songs? And I said, no. And then we went back and I asked him about the Baroque and so on. And you get the point. He couldn't name anything from different eras of music if it wasn't rock and roll. And so eventually, I finally got him to just concede, all right, yes, I like all kinds of music, I guess, but I mainly just listen to rock. I mean, how hard is that? And there's nothing embarrassing about that either. That's, I guess, why it irritates me so much. Why do you have to seem like the most well-rounded person on the planet when somebody simply asks you a question, what kind of music do you listen to? I don't ever try to sound like that. I don't say, oh, I really like all kinds of music. Renaissance, Baroque, Romantic, 20th century dissonant. Just whatever you want to ask. I like jazz. I like big band mainly. And lots of rock and popular music because that's what I grew up with. I'm not here to convince you I listen to every single form of music out there. And I don't know why other people feel that they have to as well. And speaking of different forms and styles and genres of music, here's something that really bugs me. Punk music saved rock and roll. Excuse me for 1 second. That is one of the dumbest things that has ever been mythologized. And it has been mythologized. It is an ongoing myth. It won't die. Okay, the premise is this. Disco took over popular music. And then finally, phew, punk came in with the Sex Pistols. And never mind the bollocks, here's the Sex Pistols. And rock and roll was saved. Okay, there's so many things wrong with that statement. You think punk started in 1977? Like, are you not aware of the Stooges? Are you not aware of the Ramones? Are you? I want to be your dog? That was like 1968. It's like, punk did not start in 1977, folks. It was around a long time before that. That's your first major flaw with the argument. Your second major flaw is, and it's kind of a deal breaker, disco never died. Just go to the Billboard Top 100. You can literally find them easily online. Go ahead, look at the top songs for 1976. Then look at 77, 78, 79, 80. Are you seeing a bunch of punk songs taking over in 78 and 79? No. You know what you're seeing? You're seeing that was disco. I mean, there's like popular music and there's disco and then it didn't really ever die or go away. It just kind of evolved into the dance and pop synth music that we all came to know and love, I guess. Maybe some of us did. In the 1980s. It just kind of evolved into that. Punk never took over. And the third nail in the coffin of this one is that punk is intended to be a rebellious fringe movement. A fringe movement can't take over the mainstream. If it does, it's no longer fringe, it is then the mainstream. Bruce Springsteen was rock before and after. I mean, there was no change. It's not like you listen to Bruce on Wild Innocent and the E Street Shuffle, And then the Sex Pistols come along, and then you put on The River, and Bruce is just nothing but feedback guitar. It's like, what? No, nobody who was in mainstream rock changed at all from the early 70s to the late 70s. Disco also didn't die at any point, and punk never escaped the fringe area that it wants to occupy in the first place. So, if you ever hear someone saying, "Oh, thank God punk came along and saved rock and roll," just pat them on the head and like give them a little ball to go play with or something. Just try not to frighten them. They don't know. They don't know any better. So I've got a lot more to say, but we'll deal with that later. That's all for now. Just wanted to rant about those things in particular first and get it off my chest. Have a great day. Hit like and subscribe. Do all that good stuff. And drive safely.